the Ignite Healthcare Marketing Podcast. My name is Ashley Petrochenko, and I'm the VP of Brand Marketing here at Cardinal. And I am so excited for today's episode because we're going to dig into a topic that we don't often touch on at Ignite. So many healthcare marketers are interested into influencer marketing and the role it plays in brand storytelling, social media. And our guest today is going to break down how to get started, what works, what doesn't work, and how to measure impact. So without further ado, let's welcome Ella McMahan to Ignite.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
Thanks. And Ella, you are the Director of Brand Marketing at Spring Fertility.
Yes.
Can you give the audience a little bit of background on your role, the work you do there, and then we'll dig in?
Yeah, totally. So I've been at Spring for just about over 6 years. And as you said, I'm our Director of Brand Marketing. When I started at Spring, I was the community manager, so have moved up quite a bit over the years and was the second marketing hire on the team. So I've touched basically every single marketing channel at this point, one of which is influencer marketing. And super excited to talk about this topic. I am the one who brought influencer marketing to Spring, built the program. I still run it today. But, I came from a background in women's fitness as well as like female founded alcohol and drink companies, came in with this passion for women's health and all things, like things that serve females. But I think that obviously healthcare is a different beast than just like health and wellness, right? So I think it's been really interesting to build out an influencer program at a more traditional brick and mortar healthcare company and understand how all of that can work together and not feel gimmicky or cheesy or over the top or anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a sensitive space. And there's a lot of things that we're going to dig in around that. And how do you actually consider that when building out the influencer program? But going back a little bit, I think, something that healthcare struggles with that retail brands that do so well is like differentiation. So many healthcare brands, they look the same. They have their high key white with blue logos, same stock photos. They all look the same. They all say the same things. And they don't talk about their identity, their meaning, and why someone should really trust them with their most like vulnerable healthcare decisions. And I think that is something your background is like going to give you a lot of perspective in. So where do you think healthcare lost the story? Like, how did we become so transactional and sterile?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that healthcare has, like you said, become really transactional in the way that people are always looking out for their bottom lines, right? Like it's a business, we get that. But I think that what's really interesting is people have moved away from this idea of we're here to serve patients and have really just focused on how can we do this more efficiently? How can we get more people in the door, right? And I think that, I don't know when that happened. I feel like in my mind, I'm like, it's probably like always kind of happened, right? Maybe when people were like knocking on their, the doctor was knocking on your door, like in olden times, like that felt pretty personalized probably. But now it's just like, how many people can we get through the door, through the beds, right? And I think that from the perspective of human first marketing, it just doesn't work that way. If you really want people to understand what you're trying to sell, right? Because at the end of the day, like we're all still trying to sell something, but there is, I would say, quote unquote, easier way to market or to sell to people, which is to appeal to their human, to make sure that they understand that, yes, of course, this is a business, but also the whole purpose is to serve you. And I think that's where a lot of these companies, which you said, right? Like it's like this bright, stark white with like a navy blue logo. It's all the same font. Yeah. And even like to the point of not even just marketing, right? But like branding is so cold. And I think what's really interesting about the healthcare companies, like I think about Function Health, which obviously is not a traditional healthcare company, but even their colors, right? Like it evokes such a warm, like we're here for you. We want to help you. It's like these earth tones. And I think the companies that are really winning in healthcare today are the ones that are thinking about it from the very inception of their branding and their brand guardrails of how can we make this warm and not so clinical all the time.
And even not just warm, but sometimes like fun too. Like some brands, like especially like in pediatric space, like, and they're learning and leaning a lot from retail, trying to pull in some of that human element that you reference. It's a company that we're going to be working with. We all get that, but no one wants to feel like they're, like you said, in a cold, sterile room, a waiting room, and just left alone in this complex like patient journey. It's like, it's sad.
Exactly.
No one wants that.
Yeah. And I think that, I was just going to say that I think a company that's doing this really well in the retail space is Bobby, the formula company. If you guys are listening to this and you're not familiar, look them up. They provide infant formula, but their marketing is amazing. Their fonts are fun. It's quirky. They are really good at community events. So that's somebody that we're always talking about at Spring is Bobby. That's a great brand to look up to if you're in the healthcare pediatric space.
Feel free to drop any brands that anyone, so we're going to talk about that just through the whole episode, just people, what they can learn from retail, influencers to follow, ways they get inspiration, because I think that is so helpful when you're kind of just starting at square one and you don't really know where to go.
Totally.
But the idea of, a brand can only humanize so far. Like they have the identity and you can do a lot through the branding, through messaging and creative, but there is a point where that can only go so far. And that is really where influencers can act that modern storyteller in a way that a brand can't credibly do it themselves. Is that something that you're identifying themes and messages that are most suitable for an influencer versus the brand?
Well, yes and no. I would say that our core guardrails around like our spring difference is what we call it are really like a few main things. And we talk about that from a brand perspective and we employ influencers to talk about that. I will say that, and I'll caveat this with, this is maybe not the traditional way that somebody would think to set this up, but whenever I have engaged influencers to work with Spring, I feel very, very strongly that I need to let them tell the story. So I do provide a very brief that's like, don't say X, like we don't want to be compared to Y, right? Like things like that. But I don't usually say like, you need to talk about our payment plan or you need to talk about, something that we have called the Spring Promise, because I just don't feel, even as a consumer who consumes a ton of content from influencers, like I love influencers, and I don't feel like when an influencer is giving me the key points about the brand that it is genuine, because it's like, well, obviously the brand marketing team like gave them the talking points, right? And what I think is so much more effective is hearing an influencer say, I went to Spring, I froze my eggs, here was my experience. Yes, it was difficult because freezing your eggs is not like getting your hair blown out, but also like my doctor was amazing, like the rest of my care team was so great, they were so communicative, right? Like all of these things that are like a little bit of the squishier things, right? And aren't like our payment plan, which, we want to market that, but at the end of the day, did an influencer use our payment plan? Maybe not. And so like, should they even be talking about it, right? So I think that it's like, I really try to kind of give them free reign. And I say, of course, like, we want to approve it before you put it up. But I try not to give too many guardrails just because I think then you lose the story and it kind of becomes this performative thing and it feels like what everyone else is doing.
Consumers are not stupid. They can see right through and they can understand the bullet points that are coming from their brand. So yeah, they're not stupid. I think that is a great approach to give them their freedom. And then if it doesn't work, you can go back and iterate again, start with that kind of more open-ended brief. I love that. And that also allows like the brand, they're not going to social media, TikTok, Instagram to hear about the payment plan. They're there to hear the story. They can go to your website and hear about the payment plan. So it's kind of like, where does influencer content show up? What the role does it play in that journey? And kind of like thinking about like the beginning when they're still in the education phase, like how do you kind of scope out where the content plays and maybe what different stories you're telling and different influencers along that journey? Like how do you kind of like map all that out?
Totally. Great question. I think that in terms of, how do we want to share the story? What kind of content? I really leave it up to these influencers a lot of the time. I think that as a general statement, when you are working with influencers, whether in healthcare or not, like there's this larger movement from the creator community, which is like, I know how to sell. I don't need you to tell me how to sell. And I feel like really aligned with that, and I think that a lot of times when I approach an influencer, the first thing I do, and again, I work for a fertility clinic, so it's a little bit different than like, a regular primary care office or something like that, or an urgent care. But in terms of somebody working for Spring or working with Spring, we always invite them first for a consult. There's no posting obligation. It's really just for them to come in, meet the team, understand what does their reproductive health on an individual basis look like. And so they can just like get a sense for the brand. After that, if we decide whether they decide they're going to like freeze their eggs or go through IVF or whatever it is or not, I typically say, now that you've had this experience with the brand, where do you think you should show up is it an event? Do you have a podcast? Do you have a
Mm-hmm.
Substack? I'm not super hot on Instagram stories and reels
Mm-hmm.
or TikToks unless
Mm-hmm.
it's they're going through a treatment cycle and they want to share along the way. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't really, I kind of feel like those are throwaway deliverables in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody's really buying something or looking into something like a service based off a one off post, you know? And this is such a,
The whole story
yeah,
arc, that their journey.
exactly. And it's such a technical and scientific process too that
Mm-hmm.
one post, like you're not going to get all the information you need from one post. So I usually explain that like a bunch of different touch points. Here are some examples. Where do you think you can slot in? And then we
Mm-hmm.
back into budget from there based on what they think are the best deliverables. And then in terms of like, you know, selecting the influencers, I think a lot of times for a healthcare influencer specifically, you really want somebody who is sharing kind of a lot of their life, right? Like, and would be
Mm-hmm.
willing to say, I'm going to freeze my eggs, or I need to go through IVF, or I have PCOS, right? Like, these things that are a little bit deeper than just like these fashion influencers or people who are sort of sharing like Amazon links all day long. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important that healthcare brands find a match in a creator that is willing to share and has been sharing like some more of their innermost thoughts because that is who people are excited to hear more from.
I think like in the healthcare space, we're used to success stories, patient outcome stories. So like the testimonial
Yeah.
nature of like UGC content or patient, that's well known. People do that all the time.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that might be where people gravitate towards. So I like what you're saying about it's the whole journey from what their treatments over time. It's not like they are finding a solution in a day. It's many years,
Right.
multi-years of failures,
Mm-hmm.
successes, and
Yeah.
failures again. It's a very complicated journey. And how do you find that person? So sometimes they're coming to you or their clients, or are you seeking out people that you've already seen active in the space? How do you kind of finding these influencers?
Yeah, it's a mix of different avenues, I would say. I would say our most successful campaigns or partnerships within the influencer space have been with people who, and again, like I work in fertility, so there's a more specific audience, but have been our egg freezing campaigns. And we've gone after influencers that talk a lot about dating and share really candidly about their own dating experience. So people like Serena Kerrigan or Lindsay Metzlar, who has a whole podcast about dating. From the IVF perspective, that one's a little harder. We don't typically go like seek out people
Mm-hmm.
unless they're already sharing that they're going to a clinic and they're going to get a second opinion, right? Like then that would
Mm-hmm.
maybe be somebody that we'd reach out to and say like we wouldn't pitch them a partnership, but we'd be like, if you want a second opinion, you could come to Spring. When you're looking for these influencers, a good mix of people who send in interest and then doing like your outward research and
Mm-hmm.
really aligning again, like if you are in urgent care, maybe you want to go after a mom influencer
Mm-hmm.
who needs to take her kid to the, you
Yeah.
know, to the urgent care when they're sick or like whatever it is, right? Like the other rule that I follow that I feel is very important is that these influencers will show you their true colors and their true interest, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
should listen. If I get on a call with an influencer and their first question is, well, what's your budget? I'm like, it's probably not a fit because at the end of the day, I know that this is a very personal journey and it is
Mm-hmm.
something that is probably going to be a little bit hard for them, regardless if they get paid a bunch of money or not. And the best partnerships we've ever had are from the people who are like, this is not typically what I would be paid for all of these deliverables, but I understand the
Mm-hmm.
value of this service and
Mm-hmm.
what you're giving me by, you know, partnering with me on this, like what you're giving back to my community by educating them
Mm-hmm.
on this. And so I think that's just like something I always try to remember is yes, again, it's a business at the end of the day. Like
Mm-hmm.
they need to make money. This is their job, but this is not a skincare brand. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like a t-shirt that they can sell. They really need to understand the value of what you're trying to educate people on.
And be bought in and wanting to bring that back to the community. And I think that
Exactly.
social media in some ways, and even just like Facebook groups and like Reddit forums. I mean, there is a real community that are being developed around chronic illnesses, different types of injuries that people are really looking and seeking care and seeking outside perspectives because they feel alone. So I think that's finding those people who can be authentic in that space is where you'll find the best success. We kind of talked about how to find the right person and align it with your buyer personas and how to show up authentically in these spaces. But how do you tell just from a marketing perspective, like your media mix, how do you even tell if you're actually ready for influencer marketer? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, this sounds amazing. This is how I want to show up, but it may be leaps and bounds before they're even ready to get to that space. Like, how do you kind of evaluate in a marketing maturity, like when you should jump into influencer marketing?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I would say is you have to be at a point in your marketing mix where you are comfortable spending a lot of money on something that is mostly brand awareness, especially at the beginning. I think that there is a lot of upside in influencer marketing on lower funnel events, but often it takes time, especially if you're not a service that people need to go to all the time, right? Like if you have a low lifetime patient value, right? Like there's a lot of things to consider. But at the end of the day, I think the companies that are ready and will succeed at this are the ones that, again, are prepared for what influencer marketing is for, which is not to drive a conversion tomorrow most times, and has also a leadership team that is bought into the idea that influencers can sometimes take like 2 or 3 years to convert. Right? We have influencers that we worked with in 2021 that we're still getting conversions from. And so it is just this longer cycle. And it's not something that you can always pull the lever on immediately, depending on what your business is. Like, it takes time to sort of like massage these relationships, right? And get it to a place and get the deliverables to a place that makes sense and everybody's happy with. And so understanding that it's not just like we can throw a TikTok up tomorrow, but that it does take relationship building. And if you're going to put a person in place to be in charge of it, they need to be good at relationship building, because that is like the number one thing that will make you successful.
Yeah, it's like, how do you are measuring success with someone telling their most vulnerable stories, and then you have to say, maybe that didn't hit. And like, how are you kind of, that's a relationship that you're nurturing. And like, how are you coaching them through things that we could do better the next time? Or is that you still kind of are like leaving it up to them?
I would say that if we work with a creator who doesn't perform well in terms of the metrics on the back end within like the period of time that we've determined as like, okay, if there's no conversions after, 6 months or whatever, like this probably wasn't really the right audience fit. And I would say then, like with those people, we just don't usually work with them again. There is a certain level of, again, like when I'm writing these emails to say like, what are the deliverables you think you want? Like I mentioned before, I always put in there, like, these are the things that we've seen work well in the past, and really helping them understand that providing education is the goal here, not putting the book a consult link in their stories. It's like coaching them on the front end, right? Of like, this is what's going to resonate.
Yeah.
So figure out how that slots into your content and like how you think you should present that. But it's not just like, because we can't like do affiliate links, right? Like it's not really the same. We're like, how can we give people this information in a way that feels digestible and helpful and help them take the next step if they're ready? And if they're not ready, well, great. Like, we're still happy that they like are more informed about their reproductive health now, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone's familiar with those affiliate links. And I think even the influencers might like think that you want them to do things like this. So it's almost this education. It's like, no, like this is what works. Come to the story authentically. Don't feel like you have to be a shill and like promote the brand, link everywhere. You can be authentic. But I think too many of us, we see all the retail things. We see all the links, and I think there might be some kind of expectation there. So that's really cool, kind of how you coach them through the process, and especially in healthcare and in a higher acuity, high consideration decision like this. It's very different. I think like, dental, maybe like med spa, med aesthetic, there's things that could work in that, but like in this type of space, it is a little bit different. So there's influencer rules that you may follow that I think there's a little bit of like wiggle room across the healthcare
Yes.
spectrum. So it sounds like before getting into influencer marketing, you really just need to have your basic channels in place. If your Google ads are a mess, if you're not even showing up for the key terms that you want, like there's a lot of things that you just have to get set and get right. But if those things are happening and you have the comfort level for experimentation, you have budget that you can allocate to influencer marketing to see the impact it can make over a many year period. If there was one starting point or tip that you could say to where do you begin? If you meet all those marketing maturity criteria and you're ready and you have the appetite to get into here, where do you start?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I would do is define what your goal is with the influencer marketing, right? Like we talked about, is it educating people? Obviously, it's getting more patients in the door at the end of the day, but decide what your higher funnel goals are for that. And then back into what kind of influencer do we need to meet that goal. So if it's education, like I said, find somebody who's already good about educating their audience. And this might mean that you, as the influencer manager, this is what I do. Like I go through and I follow a bunch of these influencers and I watch them for weeks or sometimes months. And I see which ones I think are a good fit and who are sharing the kind of content that could be interesting to us. And then from there, it's just reaching out, right? And being like, here's the pitch. We're really excited about you. I've been watching your content. And again, like starting that relationship off on the right foot from the beginning. And I'll say, as somebody who also has sort of dipped their toe into the creator space personally, I am sometimes appalled by these emails that I get from influencer managers where it's just like so cut and dry. Like, this is money in exchange for your Instagram posts. And I'm like, even if I'm interested in this product, like I don't even want to work with you because I feel like you think I'm like a mule or something. Like, so I would say that again, like watch these people online, decide who you think would resonate and write a personalized email. Like that will even put you in a better spot when you're negotiating because they know that you're interested in something specific about.
I love that. So you have a lot of background in, like you said, the retail space and consumer branding. And I think I wanted to share with the listeners that you also host a podcast where you talk about all things consumer marketing, branding, retail. If there's one thing that you've observed through all your work there, one tip, one observation that really works in how those brands show up and tell their stories, what would it be?
I would say the brands that are creating a lifestyle brand, whether or not that makes sense in their vertical, are the ones who are winning. I think we can see this with a brand like Summer Fridays. They obviously are more in the lifestyle space already because they're like skincare, lip gloss, whatever, but they do so many interesting activations with their community and they show up IRL. They work with interesting partners. Their two founders are very present online and share their own lives. One of them has a podcast. And I think that these brands that are creating this like larger ecosystem of you're not just getting the touch point from the brand Instagram account or the brand TikTok, but like you can follow our founders. They're amazing. You can stumble upon our events on Eventbrite, right? Like all of these things that are a little bit just like kind of feel random sometimes. I think that those are the ones that are really winning and doing a good job and the ones that are leaning into self-awareness. I think that the Ryanair TikTok is the funniest TikTok account on that platform and even like Duolingo to an extent, right? Like they do a great job of being really self-aware and Ryanair being like, yeah, we're the cheap plane. Like you might not even land. Like we'll see. Right? Which you're like, that's kind of unsettling, but it really works for their brand. And I think that people appreciate the brands that are not super serious all the time and that are real and will share their missteps and all the things or maybe the things that are bad about them that are shared online, right? Like as a person who's like right on the cusp of Gen Z and millennials, I would say that any of the brands I'm interacting with at this point that are still trying to lean more into that millennial vibe, I'm like, I'm over those guys. Like they are not fun. And I think that, yeah, brands just need to be authentic these days. Like that's what's going to make you win.
I think there's so much fear in the healthcare space to have those missteps. Like they don't want to be human. They don't want to have a personality. And like Duolingo, some of those brands are just making fun of themselves. And that's how they are humanizing in a way that feels relevant to, especially like you said, younger audiences and showing up across the journey. It's not just social. It's not just, YouTube. It's the events. It's actually showing up locally. And that's something when you work with the influencers, like you said, you're allowing them to kind of pick wherever they feel comfortable to show show up so that you kind of are like spanning that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that just as like a tip for people, the
Mm-hmm.
number one way that we see that influencers resonate with people is when they host IRL community events.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And so, again, this is not applicable to everybody, but we
Mm-hmm.
will host like a 30-person dinner at a really
Mm-hmm.
cool restaurant in New York or San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco and have the influencer be the host. And they'll do like basically a fireside chat with their doctor. And they just put it up on their Instagram or their TikTok and let people sign up. It's so successful because people are excited to be in the room with the influencer.
Mm-hmm.
They're excited to go to a nice dinner, like all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, right? And they get to enjoy and build community on your brand's dime while also being educated about the brand. So I think that's a really good first way. Like if this is applicable to your brand, that's a really good way to dip your toe into it because you'll see even just like the cultivation of the community and how that can be so effective.
Yeah, healthcare, a lot of the listeners are coming from large regional, national brands, but there's always a local element of healthcare. And if you can find those
Yeah.
even like local influencers and bring that local community together, that's a great tip. That's a great closing thought. Thank you, Ella, so much for joining Ignite. This was a really great episode. If people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you? And then maybe you could share a little bit about your podcast and where can they hear more from you?
Yes. So my podcast is called the So Us Pod. It is on Spotify and Apple. You can just type that in. It's me and one of my friends who also works in the marketing space. And then I am Ella McMahan on Instagram, and my TikTok is Ella_Pennington_. So I can write that out for you. But yeah, they're all kind of different. But yeah, I post most on TikTok, but the podcast is really fun. So highly recommend to listen.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in to Ignite. If this episode sparked an idea, please share it with a colleague. We're here to help healthcare marketers grow together, and we'll be back next week with another conversation. Thank you.